Hello and welcome to the BookTube channel, Jack and the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. And in this video, I am kicking off a project that I wanted to do in 2024, and that is posting seasonal recommendations for books. I thought it would be a lot of fun to schedule these around the solstices. So March 19th, 2024 is the spring solstice. So I'm coming to you in this video to talk about books that really capture the essence of spring. And admittedly, this was the hardest season I've had to tackle. I already have lists for all three of the other seasons, and they have a lot of books on them. And this one was kind of difficult. I want to tell you what makes me think of spring and what I had in mind when I've been reading books over the past year to put on this list. And please comment down below with the first books that come to mind when I describe these characteristics. When I'm reading a book, the things that make me think about spring are obviously the actual spring season, if a book takes place in spring and if it's described, but really it's the detail of the description. I want to hear descriptions of flowers. I want to have language that talks about them blooming and the colors. I want to hear about the smells of these flowers. And beyond that, just in nature in general, I want lots of descriptions of nature. I expect it to be very green, blue skies. I mean, maybe some rain because the flowers need to grow, but I just want lots of nature. And when it comes to the senses, I want to see it. I want to smell it. I want to feel it. I want lots of nature when talking about spring. And I think of a little bit warmer weather, but not hot, not stifling. I think of it as a very freeing atmosphere, being outdoors. And also when I talk about that freeing atmosphere, I love a feeling of a fresh start. Freshness, starting over. So in our plot, I'm looking for some of that as well. Characters be given a second chance or a new chance or reinventing themselves. These are all things that I think of with spring. Did a book come to mind when I listed those characteristics off? Please be sure you have commented down below with that book because I am super curious what other ones there are out there. However, for this video, I think I have 5 great recommendations to get us started. Again, I would love if there were more, but I think these ones just really nail the spring vibes. So for the spring solstice, here are some books you should check out. I'm kicking things off strong with my favorite, the book that I enjoyed the most and also I think has the best spring vibes. I'm talking about The Secret Garden. Now, I just finished reading this weekend and I had such a wonderful time, and I had watched the 1993 version of the movie as a kid, and so I knew the storyline, although it's been a little while since that, but I mean, of course, the book is always better than the movie. So we start this book off with, I think she's about 10 years old, 10-year-old Mary, and her parents die, unfortunately. So she has to move from India to England, where she has this long-lost uncle who lives in this massive estate. And he's grieving over the loss of his wife 10 years prior. So he's shut in. And people are telling her, don't expect to talk to your uncle because he doesn't want to see you. He's really depressed. He's like a hunchback. He's deformed from like being sad and hunched over crying. So the book starts off very dreary. The moors that she is living on are very dark and desolate, and it's very moody. And our girl Mary is actually very moody too because she is a little brat. She is a spoiled brat who can't even dress herself. And the story is of her in this mansion, this huge 100-room mansion. And she's told she can explore this whole mansion, but she just can't go into this one garden. And that's because that's where her aunt died. But of course, being the spoiled 10-year-old that she is, if you tell her not to do something, like that's all she can think about. So she ends up finding her way into this garden and she becomes obsessed with bringing it back to life. She meets a couple other amazing friends around her age to help her with this and bring the garden back. And why this captures spring. So first of all, not only does it actually take place in spring, not only do you have the nature aspect of her bringing this garden back to life, and you have description of the flowers, like the roses blooming and, you know, things appearing dead, but they're actually alive and coming back, and there's baby animals and stuff. So you have this like visualization of spring, right? But this book really hits on all the senses. So she comes in from the outdoors and she's talking to someone and he says, I can smell it on you. I can smell the spring. What is that? It smells, you know, like, and the way that they talk about it is just so beautiful. I'm like, wow, you know, spring does have a smell. At least here in Arizona, it smells clean. It smells like orange blossoms, maybe a little bit. There's just like a citrusy scent to it. And it does smell a little bit different. And I live in the city. Imagine if I lived in the country surrounded by nature. That'd be amazing. For the other senses, the book doesn't go too much into like tastes, but it does talk about how Mary and her friends are putting on weight because they're so much more active working in the garden, that they're eating so much more food. So there are some descriptions of food. So we do get some of the senses in that as well. And as the book goes on, Mary evolves. She's not as much of a spoiled brat. And so I really did get that fresh start feeling from her moving from kind of like she was ignored by her parents, but now that they're gone and she's living with her uncle, she has this like fresh start, reinventing herself. She does evolve and grow up, and she turns out to be a character that is really charming and charismatic and fun to read about. So that also gives me the spring vibes. The thing that I enjoyed about this book, technically it is a middle grade, like a middle grade classic. I am so jaded as a reader, because I'm just expecting horrible things to happen. I mean, hey, even in Disney, Mufasa dies, right? Like, we're just primed to be emotionally tortured as kids. So like nothing is safe. But I'm reading this, and if like an adult was nice to Mary, I'm like, oh, he's gonna essay her. Just watch. Or if she tells her secret to someone about the garden, I'm like, oh, they're gonna betray her. Just watch. Or they're talking about this 100-room mansion and how the kids have this opportunity to go explore each of the rooms, which is, I'm a sucker for atmosphere, and like that setting and that atmosphere is my dream. Childhood and adulthood. Exploring this mansion is awesome. And so we're talking about this mansion and I'm like, oh, you know what? I bet you this uncle got his wealth from doing something scandalous, or the government is gonna overpower him and take it all. Or it's gonna, you know, it's gonna get burnt down, the government's gonna take it, they're gonna seize the property, just watch. Like, every corner of this book, I was like questioning and waiting for something bad to happen. But it really doesn't. This is just an engaging book with a wonderful, kind plot, kind characters. It's just so sweet, and it was such a relief. Such a relief from like the everyday adulthood things. And it just felt good, and like a warm hug. And that is also what makes me think of spring, warmth. And so this book, on so many different levels, really, really captured the feelings of spring for me. The next spring recommendation I have for you is another classic, another middle grade. It's Anne of Green Gables. And I feel like this is a book that I have seen often on BookTube, but I haven't heard too much about. And I don't think I ever read this as a kid. I'm sure there's a screen adaptation, but I never saw it. But this is also a great spring book. So we have a younger character. Again, she starts off as 11 years old. In this book, we follow her from 11 to like 16 or 17. And it's kind of cute because these people in the country have decided to adopt. They want to adopt an 11-year-old boy. But there's some miscommunication and they get Anne, who is 11 years old, but definitely not a boy. And the way this girl charms them and gets them to fall in love with her is just so adorable. And oh my gosh, does she talk. Do you remember, okay, if you're a fan of the show Friends, Phoebe dates this guy named Parker, who is this sunshine, optimistic character and who talks non-stop. And that's who Anne made me think of. I also think if you're a fan of the adorkable characters in Disney animated films, that you'd really like this. The kind that are so awkward and talkative, but they're so kind, and they have the best of intentions, but they find themselves in trouble all the time. Like there's this scene where Anne accidentally gets her best friend drunk on like wine, and so the adults are furious because they think that she did this on purpose, and she's just like awkward and, you know, apologizing, and they don't believe her, and she just finds herself in all these interesting situations. And the plot is really just that. It's just these little situations that she finds herself in over time as she grows up, and it is so charming. This really fits the spring vibes because when she comes to Green Gables, I think that's the name of like the house or the property, she's talking about the beauty of the trees, and there's a lot of talk of the cherry blossoms and apple blossoms, and throughout the whole book actually, even though we go through some different seasons, she often is talking about these different flowers and these different elements of nature. So nature is very, very much present in this, along with that fresh start plot, because this orphan is coming to find a family and find friends, and boy does she deserve it. She deserves all the wonderful things, and it was really good. Normally I don't like the feeling of like a bunch of short stories. I like if there's like one cohesive plot that takes us through, and I can find myself getting annoyed with characters that are overly sunshine and optimistic, but again, charming. I was just so, Anne charmed me in my cold, cold winter heart. So I just found this a great read, great atmosphere for spring, and I recommend it to you. The next recommendation has an element that I didn't mention in the beginning, but I also think pairs really well with spring, and that is an element of whimsy. I really found that when I recently read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Now, to get the full impact, don't just read this version. I just brought this because I love this animated cover, like this gothic picture I think is really cool. But you need to read both books, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, because it's actually Through the Looking Glass that has the scene with the flowers talking to Alice. If you've seen the cartoon, then you know what I'm talking about. But you get more nature in that one. But I think this one really fits with spring because it is so whimsical. And I don't know if it's because of all of the various covers I've seen of this book, that they're all pastel, but that also makes me think of like April timeframe. It's really hard. I was reading this and I was like, why does this book make me think of April? So I just read this in February, and I've seen all sorts of screen adaptations, so I knew the story. And there's something that has to have been marketed to me to make me think of reading this book in the month of April, make me think of spring. I don't know if it's the colors that have been presented to me or what, but it's a very magical story of Alice getting stuck in Wonderland, the different creatures that she runs into. Although now that I think about it, maybe it's the White Rabbit that makes me think of like the Easter Bunny. That might be it. There's something subconscious going on there. But generally, I think that the whimsical nature, the fun adventure, it really makes me think of spring. So this could be a great time of year to pick up Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. All right, time to put the kids to bed for my last two spring recommendations, because we are going to enter into some spicy territory right now. The next recommendation I have for you is an erotic novella. It is called The Fourleaf. This is one that I picked up on Kindle Unlimited. It is part of a series called the Holy Night Novellas, which are all themed around a different holiday, which I love. I love a good theme. So The Fourleaf is centered around St. Patrick's Day. It's about 100 pages, so it won't take you long to read. This is a childhood friend's story, and our main character, she runs a hotel, and she had made a pass on her best friend at one point, and she felt rejected and really, really embarrassed. So even though she's had this like lifelong crush on him, like she's scared to act on it again. So he's at the hotel on St. Patrick's Day. There's all these parades going on outside, and he's helping her like fix a sink. And there's just this tension between them. And it turns out he has a very particular preference, which made it really fun to read about. So this was a great read. Again, 100 pages, so you're not going to get a whole lot of character development. You're not going to get that full atmosphere of St. Patrick's Day other than like the parades, because it's so short. There's not a lot of time to really build this out. But if you love a good theme, if you want a quick, spicy read, if you want good chemistry between your characters and good spice, The Fourleaf is definitely a great book to read in spring. My last recommendation for you is also a spicy novella. This one comes in at 130 pages. It's actually written by the same author as The Fourleaf, so similar vibes, but this one is called Mother's Day Inn. To be transparent, I have not read this one yet. This is on my TBR, but Obviously, I'm saving it for around Mother's Day because I think, duh, that's common sense. So I can't necessarily say this is a good book, but I've read enough of these Holy Night novellas to really trust what I'm getting myself into. In this one, we follow a 33-year-old single mom. She has a 6-year-old daughter, I believe. And this is an age gap romance with a younger man. He is 10 years younger. He is the hot new lifeguard. And I think the premise of this is that she's looking forward to a quiet Mother's Day alone and by herself. But the younger lifeguard has other plans in mind. Very spicy. I'm not sure what preferences this book will focus on, because usually each of these holiday themed ones has like a different kink to it, if I can say that on YouTube. I don't know. So we already know the tropes, right? Like the age gap, younger man, single mom. So I'm excited to read this one. I'll check it out from Kindle Unlimited closer to Mother's Day, see what it's all about. But I mean, that has to be a great spring read because it focuses on the holiday. Those are the 5 spring recommendations I have for you to celebrate the spring solstice on March 19th. I wonder if you're doing anything to celebrate. I don't think there's any common traditions or anything. I myself love spring because in Arizona, it's nice and warm. Okay, well, it's always nice and warm here, but it's about 75 degrees, which is like my perfect temperature. I just want to be outside all the time. I want to go to festivals and be out by the pool, although I don't get in the pool yet because it is way too cold. The water's too cold for that. But I just love being outdoors. And I also get like this wild kick to just clean everything. Spring cleaning is like my spring tradition and I get super, super excited. So I like to do all these spring themed things. And that's why I love to pair any of these books with the season. So I hope they add some value to your spring season. I hope you comment down below with other books you think really capture the spring spirit, because I want more. I want more. There's never enough books on our TBR. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video. Happy spring reading. I'll see you next time.